from the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Senator Jeff Flake spoke at the Capitol today on U.S. relations with Cuba, how the Arizona legislature views the future of trade and travel between the two nations.
Plus, Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone says 10 cities closure is underway, but not quite there yet. We bring you progress so far from our exclusive one-on-one interview.
And President Donald Trump hosted companies from each of the 50 states whose products are made here in the U.S. Arizona-based company Ping talks about being featured at the White House.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Emily Bloom.
And I'm Patricio Espinosa. Thank you for joining us. There has been a lot of talk in Washington about travel bans, but supporters of the greater trade with Cuba say restrictions with that country would amount to a travel ban on Americans. Cronkite News reporter Alex Valdez was at the meeting today between Cuban merchants and U.S. senators.
Recently, President Donald Trump tightened restrictions with Cuba. Today at a press conference, many Cuban entrepreneurs are saying the best way to help the Cuban people are to allow free trade and travel to their country.
After the announcement of President Trump, we have been losing a lot of clients, so I think I am about to lose my business.
Julia de la Rosa, a bed and breakfast owner in Havana, saw an increase in business when President Obama opened relations between U.S. and Cuba. But that was before President Trump scaled things back.
It was incredible 2 years ago when former President Obama opened the relationships. We really saw that it was an incredible opportunity for us to grow up.
President Trump's new policy is aimed at forcing Cuba to improve its human rights record while making sure American business goes to the private sector and not the military. But Republican Senator Jeff Flake echoes the words of De La Rosa, saying the change in Cuba comes from the American people.
A lot has changed in Cuba over the past 5 years in particular with the Cuban entrepreneurs. This is the untold story, really, of what's happened in Cuba. And it's because American travel has increased, both among Cuban Americans and ordinary Americans. And it has benefited the Cuban people immensely.
De La Rosa said the new travel policy will not just affect her, but also the private subcontractors she uses to do labor around her bed and breakfast, an issue that both De La Rosa and Flake say can be avoided by allowing Americans to visit Cuba.
More Americans, I think, are doing that, and I hope that even more do. Why in the world we would want to restrict that? And remember that this travel ban we have is not on Cubans, it's on Americans, and so we ought to allow more travel.
Reporting from the Capitol, I'm Alex Valdez, Cronkite News.
There are still not enough votes secured to move the proposed GOP health care bill forward. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is planning to draft a new bill completely from scratch, but McConnell wants the Senate to vote to repeal the Obamacare first. Senator John McCain echoed the sentiment, saying, quote, "One of the major problems with Obamacare was that it was written on a strict party line basis and driven through Congress without a single Republican vote. As this law continues to crumble in Arizona and states across the country, we must not repeat the original mistakes that led to Obamacare's failure," end quote.
And Senator McCain made that statement from Phoenix, where he is recovering from surgery he had to remove a blood clot last Friday. Cronkite News reporter Emma Lockhart spoke with medical experts about the procedure McCain underwent.
I spoke to him last night, and he sounded great. He sounded good, and I hope that we can get him back here as quickly as possible. We need him.
Well wishes from one Arizona senator to another as Senator John McCain recovers from surgery. A 5-centimeter blood clot was removed from McCain's brain Friday at the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix. A health concern that one neurosurgeon says is serious.
A 5-centimeter blood clot is a pretty big deal.
To access the clot, removing part of the skull is usually necessary.
It typically involves drilling a hole, maybe a series of holes, and then connecting those holes with a saw to remove the bone.
There are many factors that could have caused the clot. One possibility, McCain's history of melanoma.
Melanoma, if it is spread to the brain, can have bleeding and could appear to be something like this. So I think one of the concerns.
Doctors at the Mayo Clinic won't know for sure what caused the blood clot until a pathology report comes back, probably sometime this week. In Washington, Emma Lockhart, Cronkite News.
The superintendent from one Arizona school district testified before a congressional committee today on federal funding for schools. Cronkite News reporter Noelle Lilly spoke with Arizona education officials after a House hearing in Washington.
The students in our schools are our future leaders, our future workforce, and we must invest in our future by investing in public education.
Dysart Superintendent Gail Plednick joined other education officials today at a House committee hearing on ESSA, or the Every Student Succeeds Act, the 2015 law that replaced the No Child Left Behind Act and gave power back to the states. The officials were here to discuss how local governments are serving underprivileged kids through this law, as well as how the federal government can help.
The ultimate success of ESSA lies in our implementation, yes, but also in federal appropriations. It is critical Congress match the bipartisan support demonstrated for the policy of the law and appropriate funding support.
But for ESSA to work, Plednick says the states need more financial support.
When you think about a child, all that funding is to support the individual child and their needs. Underserved populations in our schools, they need that support. We have to be able to provide that. So when you add all of those cuts together, it could have a devastating impact on our students in Arizona.
President Donald Trump's fiscal 2017 budget would cut funding for several elements of the Every Student Succeeds Act. Chairman for the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, Virginia Fox, argued that even with funding, the focus of ESSA needs to be on accountability at the state level.
Given the monumental shift in education policy represented by ESSA, it's important that we hear how implementation is progressing.
And so we feel confident in our ability then to have that approved and move forward on the implementation.
In Washington, Noelle Lilly, Cronkite News.
Arizona is one of only 17 states to have already completed its ESSA plans. These are due for submission to the federal government this September.
Last April, Maricopa County Sheriff Paul Penzone announced the closing of Tent City. At least half of the population has been relocated since, but as of this morning, 378 work furlough or work release inmates are still housed at Tent City. We sat down with the sheriff to get an update as to when a complete shutdown is expected.
And I've been very clear about that from the beginning, that when we put a schedule on that, I described how half of that population was what we'd call just kind of a convicted general population who could be reassigned within the jails that exist without much of a challenge. The other half of that population is our work furlough program, which is far more complicated because they come and go every day. So we have to be able to isolate them to one space so that our staff can manage that transition. We're doing our best. I want to make sure that we look for the health and the care of our detainees as a priority, but we can't rush to fail. We have to make sure whenever we make that full transition that it is a long-term solution.
And there have been concerns about the summer heat. The 378 prisoners who remain are, however, let out at 8 a.m. in the morning, says the sheriff, and then come back at 8 p.m. to spend the night at Tent City. MCSO says plenty of water and shade is offered. The sheriff tells Cronkite News that he expects to have everyone out of Tent City before January 1st of 2018.
If you've ever had a traffic ticket or been cited for an overgrown lawn, you have dealt with a city court. A new report from the Goldwater Institute says the fees you pay are having a large impact on city budgets. Cronkite News reporter Tyler Finger is in our broadcast center and tells us just how significant that impact is.
The American Civil Liberties Union joined the Goldwater Institute in revealing this report. In it, they say city courts are influenced by politics and it's affecting your rights and your bank account. Tonight, Arizona's city courts are under scrutiny.
The only thing on that judge's mind ought to be making sure you get a fair hearing in court, not whether revenues are meeting projections.
The report from the Goldwater Institute is questioning city courts' motives.
We're taking what are fundamentally minor offenses mostly traffic offenses, but also a lot of very minor ordinance violations. And we're using this big criminal enforcement hammer to make sure you pay your fines.
According to the report, the city of Tempe brought in 2.5 times more money on court fines and fees than they spent on cases during the 2014-2015 fiscal year. The ACLU says it's time to put a spotlight on the issue.
We're hoping to see some meaningful change that is through the Arizona legislature. I mean, for example, there were bills that were introduced through the courts that could address some of the problems that were raised in this report, and we're hoping that there's support at the legislature next year.
In the report, the Goldwater Institute recommends several ways to fix the problem, like consolidating city courts into county courts and making sure judges answer to the voters, not city leaders.
The idea is you take away that political pressure, the ability of mayors and city councils to pressure judges in ways that can affect what goes on in their courtroom.
We reached out to the cities of Tempe, Scottsdale, and Paradise Valley. All of them were mentioned in the report. The city of Scottsdale got back to us a short time ago and said the majority of their fines are civil traffic, and those go before a hearing officer who is not appointed by the city council. Quote, there is no pressure for judges to do fines. For more on the report, our team put together a full digital story breaking it down. That's on our website, cronkitenews.azpbs.org. In the broadcast center, Tyler Fingert, Cronkite News.
And Made in America Week continues in Washington, D.C., a week that kicked off with displays of American-made products at the White House. Cronkite News reporter Emma Lockhart spoke with the Arizona company that represented the state from our Washington bureau.
The Trump White House is making a habit out of trying to get its message across by having theme weeks that are built around a specific topic. There was Infrastructure Week, Workforce Development Week, now it's Made in America Week, to focus on, well, goods made in America.
From tractors displayed on the front lawn to cowboy hats that President Donald Trump tried on himself, American-made products from each state were at the White House, including Ping Golf from Arizona.
We're not a huge company in Arizona, but we're proud of what we do, and to see that we were one of 50 companies that they asked to come visit it was an honor to be there.
Ping's golf clubs are assembled in Phoenix, some with American parts, others of international parts. They say the putter they showcased at the event, however, is 100% USA made.
We think it gives us a competitive advantage by being able to put stuff together, custom built in Phoenix, and get it to our customer faster.
Trump viewed the products himself.
As I walked through the halls, we saw so many great companies.
And signed a Made in America proclamation, all to help promote goods made in the U.S. Solheim says political views aside, he was happy to be in the president's company.
To be in the White House and to say hi and say thank you for what you're doing and your service is an honor. And it's an honor for me as an American to be able to have that opportunity.
Solheim told me he's not exactly sure how Ping got chosen for the White House event, but he was thrilled to get the call last week nonetheless. Live in Washington, Emma Lockhart, Cronkite News.
It can be difficult for a heart to return to normal after a heart attack, but soon that could change.
Coming up on Cronkite News, how ASU researchers are aiming to repair damages to heart tissue after heart attacks.
And how this device can send doctors information about your heart right to their smartphones.
I think I finally found my hallelujah. I've been waiting for this moment all my life now. All my dreams are coming true, yeah. I've been waiting for this moment. It's good to be alive right about now.
Heart attacks are the #1 killer in the U.S. Once a patient suffers a heart attack, there's no way for that damaged tissue to be repaired. But as Cronkite News reporter Tyler Paley learned, that may not be the case for too much longer.
The biomedical engineering field has seen a huge boost in the concept of organ-on-a-chip technology over the years. These chips make it possible for scientists to study real human tissue that act like organs. But ASU professor Mehdi Nika is taking it one step further. He's creating a heart attack on a chip.
One day I came up with this idea. Now wait, we have seen heart-on-a-chip models outside, but what if we make the first heart attack on a chip?
Nika's invention puts human tissue on a microchip to study the structure of the cells before and after a heart attack. He reached out to Dr. Raymond Magrino, a cardiologist at the Phoenix VA hospital and one of the closest collaborators on Nika's project. Every day, he sees the irreparable damage heart attacks can bring.
The purpose of this project is to understand the biology of what happens to cardiac cells during ischemic conditions or when the oxygen level is low.
The project is funded through a $500,000 grant from the National Science Foundation over the next 5 years. Essentially, the goal is to create a chip with tissue that mimics the way a heart would act in distress.
The ability to put in a very small microchip 3D model what you think is happening on a disease level.
And Nika's goal is two-pronged. He wants to research methods of preventing heart attacks altogether, but he acknowledges it's impossible to eliminate them completely.
So there might be other solutions in terms of finding more efficient therapeutics.
In the early stages of the experimentation, Nika will use stem cells, but down the road, he'll study real damaged tissue.
Can we have cells from patients with heart attack and their disease cells, right? And then we can put them inside the chip. We can mimic their structure.
And in 5 years, it will all boil down to one simple question.
Will this save lives?
Definitely, in future. That's where the technology and then biological findings are going, basically. That's our aim.
Beginning next summer, Dr. Nika and his team will host summer workshops for high school students who want to learn more about the microengineering field. In the Broadcast Center, Tyler Paley, Cronkite News.
And if it happens, how do patients recover from a heart attack? A new device the size of a paperclip could make a difference, as Cronkite News reporter Kevin Cusack has learned.
First heart attack, I was in a restaurant standing in line to get in, and bingo, it hit me.
Meet David Barnard, a 74-year-old Phoenix resident and heart failure survivor. Barnard has been fighting heart disease for 25 years.
I was 50 years old 24 years ago. I had my first heart attack, hit the deck, went running to the hospital, did a triple bypass. Things went very well for a long period of time. I was in good shape, fit, still exercised after the rehab, and things went along for years. In 2006, I had another heart attack and had a double bypass.
To help monitor his condition, Barnard's doctor wanted to implant a CardioMEMS HF system. The sensor is about the size of a paperclip. Surgeons implant it through a catheter in the heart's pulmonary artery.
So this device has been shown that it can pick up early sign of accumulation of water in the body so that the physician can interfere early on, get rid of that excess fluid, and by doing that, prevent the patient from going into the hospital.
The device measures the pressure and transmits the data to the physicians.
Basically, the device can talk to a monitoring device in the patient bedroom, which is usually placed in this monitoring pillow. And so they wirelessly can communicate, and then that pillow will wirelessly communicate with the internet and download the information to our office.
It gives Barnard peace of mind.
I want to just keep going. I want to try everything I can try and do, and it helps the world, it helps me, and that's what all I care about.
Kevin Cusack, Cronkite News.
And we follow up with Mr. Barnard, and he tells us the procedure was successful and he's feeling great.
Staying healthy is important, especially when we're playing sports.
Coming up on Cronkite News, how learning martial arts can make football safer.
And the majority of our state is currently under a flash flood watch. What you need to look out for coming up in your full 7-day forecast.
What are you doing?
Possibilities. Your day is filled with them.
Reach up, energy in the fingertips, collapse.
TV, play Downton Abbey.
And PBS helps everyone discover theirs. Anytime, anywhere.
Up in the sky, you can see it.
PBS, we're with you for life.
The Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management has lifted fire restrictions on state land in 7 counties. This means people can now build campfires in Maricopa, Navajo, Coconino counties, among others. Still, fire officials urge campers to be careful when lighting fires. We have monsoon weather to thank for this lifted restrictions. Emily Bloom joins us with the latest weather and tells us whether any storms are coming up this week.
Well, we started out our day today at 79 degrees. We are currently under partly cloudy skies. That humidity is at 28% and 100 degrees at the moment. Our high for today is 101 degrees, 5 degrees below that average of 106 and 14 degrees below that record of 115 set back in 1989. Now across the valley, at 5 p.m., we've got 102 in Surprise, 100 here in Phoenix, 100 in Scottsdale, and 99 in Chandler. Now, jumping ahead a couple hours, maybe you're wanting to get a walk in before that sun sets, we will all be down into the 90s, 96 in Levine, 95 in Buckeye, 88 in Cave Creek. Now, taking a look across our state at the moment, those temperatures are... We've got 106 in Lake Havasu, 70 at the Grand Canyon, 77 in Show Low, and 90 down in Tucson. Now, taking a look at the satellite radar, we do have storms making their way across the state at the moment. What we don't know at this time is if these storms will be strong enough to sustain themselves down into Phoenix. However, despite that, the National Weather Service has issued a flash flood watch, and that is in effect until 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. That high for tomorrow will be 102 degrees. And then once again, we are looking at least a 10% chance for some of that monsoon weather each and every day in the week ahead. For Cronkite Weather, I'm Emily Bloom.
And athletes try their best to stay safe during the game, but this isn't quite as easy for football players. Coming up on Cronkite News, we tell you how a former Cardinals player is taking his experience in the field and martial arts to play it safe.
You're a dreamer, don't hide it from anyone, don't hide it from anyone. Hey, would you believe me if I said we are here for a reason now? This is our life, this is what counts, this is for us. I will go
A former Arizona Cardinal is using mixed martial arts techniques to try to make football a safer game. Cronkite News reporter Annika Walters tells us how this curriculum is keeping players safe.
That's right, Patricio. You've heard the phrase, get your head in the game, but at this Safe Football Camp, high school players are learning new ways to block and tackle by taking their heads out of the game. The Safe Football Camp for high school offensive linemen in Phoenix may be one of the quietest versions of the sport.
The whole idea is to try to slow the process down.
It's not a typical football practice. No screeching whistle or loud crunches of pads and gear. It's more like a discussion.
I want to intercept it with my backside.
Former Arizona Cardinals center Scott Peters founded Safe Football in 2012 after he realized mixed martial arts techniques he was learning off the field could be used on the gridiron.
Look, I just do this. It's part of my release every time. The guys are going to generate more force. They're under greater control. And most importantly, with all the concussions that go on, trying to take away the head from contact.
According to a 2011 study published in the American Journal of Sports Medicine, football is consistently the high school sport with the most concussions. But Deer Valley High School offensive lineman Joey Ramos and his father Jaime, Deer Valley's line coach, say no concussions have occurred on their line after learning to play safe football.
0 concussions, that's a big thing for me. There's been 1 scratch on my helmet, and I've had the same helmet for 2 years now.
Now you can see the offensive linemen training behind me. They're not using mouth guards, they're not wearing helmets, and there's barely any pads on scene. Now Ramos tells me that the technique is much more important to preventing injuries than any kind of protection can provide.
They're making a custom fit helmet, they're doing all this other stuff. They've got mouth guards that have sensors in them that can calculate, the impact level of a player. So that's going to tell the coach, hey, your kid's got a concussion, but he's still got a concussion.
Coach Ramos says the way to prevent injuries is with better technique, not better technology. In the broadcast center, Annika Walters, Cronkite News.
Cronkite News is proud to be the news division of Arizona PBS. Here's what's coming up on Arizona Horizon and PBS NewsHour.
On the next Arizona Horizon, a plan to renegotiate NAFTA has been released. We'll check it out and see what it means for Arizona businesses. And we'll find out who's being inducted into the Arizona Music Entertainment Hall of Fame.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next NewsHour. An Afghan girls robotics team defies the odds and immigration obstacles to compete in the U.S. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thank you for joining us.
And remember, for top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.